time for a change, you know. As a strength and conditioning coach, you have this thought that you want to be at the table. You want to sit at the table with these legends and these godfathers of strength and conditioning. And kind of you get to that table and you realize, man, this isn't the table that I thought it was.
So you're doing that, and I imagine you're renting out space in a gym, or you're meeting them at a gym, and then eventually you get into even like owning part of a gym too.
So that was like a big box gym. So there we call them One Life Fitnesses, but maybe like a Gold's Gym or Anytime Fitness type deal. And then owned the facility that I was at with some business partners I had, and we did that for maybe 5 years, and then during COVID sold that. My percentage of that, but it was time for a change, you know. You know, you think it's almost like that concept of me and you were talking about it of, as a strength and conditioning coach, you have this thought that you want to be at the table. You want to sit at the table with these legends and these godfathers of strength and conditioning, and then kind of you get to that table and you realize, man, this isn't the table that I thought it was. You know, people aren't happy. They work all the time. They don't have relationships with their families. And that's kind of an unfair thing to say for the most part, because there are some coaches that are really good.
Sure.
But I was just realizing that, you know, there was a couple people that I looked up to, and I talked to them and I was like, man, this isn't what I want.
Yeah.
So then that's when I kind of took a step back, and that's when we spoke about transitioning and trying to, you know, use social media and my name to leverage opportunities to be at home more, to be available more. And then obviously to scale my time. You know, that's the most valuable thing that I have is my time, my freedom.
Yeah.
How I can leverage that to not only provide for my family, but to be there for my family.
And so that was like in those days, okay, you're owning this facility, you're working your tail off. Mm-hmm. These are early mornings, long nights. So was there like an imbalance in your?
There is no balance.
There's no balance.
when you know that there is a rent that has to be made every month, and you know on the first, like, oh, we just paid it last month. Here it is again.
Yep.
Like you're chasing that number, and then you almost feel like a guilt when you're not there. Like, well, if I'm not there, I'm not making money. I'm not, you know, is this time away worth it? And then you start to like almost try to justify not being at home. Like, well, I'm just sitting here watching TV. I'm not even with my kids or upstairs playing. I could be at work training someone.
Yeah.
So it's just like this dangerous cycle of like, you're not doing enough. But man, I went a year or two without taking any days, no vacations, no nothing. Like my wife was over it for sure. I mean, I remember many nights, especially during like travel seasons with softball, like I wouldn't see my daughter in the morning because I would be there 6:30, 7 a.m. And then the last team would end at 9 p.m. So by the time I get home at 9:30, she's already asleep. So 2 or 3 nights out of the week, I wouldn't even see my daughter. So it's, you know, there is no balance. And the concept of balance is interesting because I had a good friend of mine, George Carvajal, was a mentor. And when I was starting to experience that burnout, he was talking about the concept of balance. And even us having a conversation, people will say like, well, how's life going? And they'll be like, well, I'm just trying to balance work and life. And I mentioned that to him one time on one of our phone calls, and he was like, you can't balance work and life. And he was like, work is B and family is A. Like there is no balance for things that are not equal. And that really resonated with me because it was like, there are times in your life where you do have to push all in. So when I'm talking to coaches and they're like, man, I don't know how I can be balanced with my schedule. Sometimes you're on a runway, or sometimes you're on a straightaway and you got to sprint.
Yep.
But when you hit that curve, you need to slow down. And that's when I started to really like take a step back and be like, well, I don't know if I can balance my day-to-day seriously because I do have to be at work and I do have to make money. But when I am at home, I can be more present.
Yep.
When I'm on that curve, I can slow down and walk. Like I don't have to sprint through the turns.
Yep. Good for you. So you're feeling this pain, and then at some point you make the transition from, hey, I'm a gym owner to I want to start this online business. Tell me about how that seed was planted, or how did that idea become something that was growing even inside of you before it became a reality?
Honestly, as a what I would consider myself a professional strength coach, whatever that means, I felt very cringy. Like I'm not an online trainer. I'm not this influencer type person, whatever. And I've had some good friends that have been in the space, and they were like, dude, you just need to do it. Just do it and see what happens. What's the worst that can happen? No one's going to think less of you for doing it, but you may surprise yourself.
Yeah.
And then that's when we spoke, and then just kind of like put your it's almost like putting your ego aside and just going for it. And but there's all those like things that you think people are going to think differently of you. You think people are going to be like, oh, he's a sellout. He's just selling online programs now or selling online training. But then you start to look around and you're like, man, there's a lot of people selling online training that don't really know what they're talking about. Whereas if the credible coaches, not just me, but like I always encourage other coaches to do it now, is, you know, people want valuable information. Like they want to learn. They want to learn from like the head strength coach from so-and-so. Like that's a cool feeling.
Yeah.
But they just don't provide those options. And I feel like coaches now, it's becoming a lot more less taboo and a lot more accepted for sure.
Yeah. Talk about that like stress or that anxiety of making that step. Like what was that like for you?
Well, I'll never forget that first program. Like you put it out there and you're just like, you know, is anyone going to buy this? Is anyone, you know, are people not going to care? And there's been some programs I put out that aren't like huge hits.
Yeah.
But there's been some like that first mobility one that kind of like took off and it's still doing well. And it just kind of blows you away. The people that do it, and it's almost like the value that we want as a coach. You always perceive your value as like this organization asking you to speak for them, or this college or pro team asking you to come and consult for them. So it's almost like this value that you're always chasing. Like, it's almost like I'm looking for approval from my dad. Mm-hmm. Like I want my dad to be like, good job, buddy. Like that sort of thing. And you're chasing approval from your dad for so long that you forget the fact that there's all these other people that validate you. Mm-hmm. Like they would love to learn from you, that they would love to experience your training and learn a little bit more about you as a person and how you approach mobility training in my specific situation. And it was kind of like eye-opening because you don't think that when you're in the midst of like running a business, when you're in the midst of training people. Like you don't think that there's this bigger outside picture on the outside that values you even more.
Yeah. And so much to offer the world if you're not chasing necessarily like a logo or the next job. There's so much to give.